Fousy has been an invaluable resource, and he and I have become very, very close in the last 4 years, and very much so more recently in putting together the souvenir program that's available. Um, his knowledge of General Hill is beyond reproach, and it didn't just start last week or 2 years ago. In the early 1990s, Patrick was the historical consultant on Gettysburg and played General A.P. Hill in the movie. He was also the historical consultant for Gods and Generals, and they killed his character in any event. That's a different story for Patrick for another day. Patrick is also the only Yankee that I would ever allow to be on the board of the A.P. Hill Memorial Association, but I kind of had to do it. But in any event, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome actor, historian, and A.P. Hill himself, Patrick Fousy.
It's a beautiful day for making things right. You all agree? Okay. The General is smiling down upon us today. What I would like to do is talk about the original unveiling of the grave marker. But we must go back to those words of Robert E. Lee. He is now at rest. Those are the words spoken by General Robert E. Lee upon hearing of the death of Lieutenant General A.P. Hill on April the 2nd, 1865. 2 days later, on April 4th, General Hill was hastily buried in the Winston Cemetery in Chesterfield County without any military honors. In February 1867, General Hill's body was moved and buried in Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond with no military honors again, and without informing the Hill family. This was wrong. So in 1879, Captain William E. Cameron wrote a tribute to General Hill that said, "No history of him has yet been written, and no stone marks his resting place. General A.P. Hill should not be forgotten, for that Virginia soldier never lost a post that duty gave him to defend, and never failed to crown an attack." This sentiment grew and grew and grew. And in 1887, the Pegram Battalion Association formed the A.P. Hill Monument Association and collected private funds to honor General Hill with the proper headstone. Well, Lewis Ginther, who was a major, a former staff officer under General A.P. Hill, donated land in Richmond, and the renowned sculptor, Richmond's own William L. Shepard, was commissioned to do the headstone. Then on July 1st, 1891, General Hill's remains were removed from Hollywood Cemetery and buried underneath the foundation of the base, which still had yet to be completed. All this still, and being buried for the third time without any military honors. Finally, the next year, on Memorial Day, May 30th, 1892, a celebration of the unveiling of General Hill's headstone took place. I'm now going to read to you a description of the ceremony from the Richmond Dispatch, May 31st, 1892. The rumble of artillery, the flash of sabers, the gleam of bayonets, the waving of battle flags, the tramp of infantry and the squadrons of cavalry, the notes of the bugle, and the military music of the bands made the occasion inspiring, marked by the throng of everyone were there and who wore the badge of the 13th Virginia, A.P. Hill's old regiment from Culpeper. Here is right. The march was a long, hot, and dusty one, but those in line, including the veterans, stood to it with splendid steadiness. Many bore on their bodies the scars of battle, but their courage, their fortitude, and their disregard for the obstacles that confronted them made the armies of the Confederacy the admiration of the world. Hundreds of badges with the colors of the lost cause were sold upon the streets. Pretty much what we are doing here today, ladies and gentlemen, going back in time, putting on those on your lapels, those badges of honor for A.P. Hill. And many of those were worn on their coat lapels, on those who marched on the long line honoring General Hill. Among those attended at that ceremony were Grand Marshal General Harry Heath, Colonel William Palmer, A.P. Hill's Chief of Staff, Colonel Walter Taylor, General Fitzhugh Lee, Colonel Charles Venable, General James A. Walker, Captain George E. Pickett, Jr., and there, among the crowd, was Sergeant George Washington Tucker, General A.P. Hill's Chief of Couriers, who was with A.P. Hill when the general was killed on that morning of April 2nd, 1865. Special guests included Virginia Governor P.W. McKinley and his wife, also the Reverend J. William Jones, Major Louis Ginther, and Mr. William L. Shepard, the artist of the headstone. Mrs. Hill could not attend due to illness, but representing the Hill family were General's two daughters, Miss Lucy Lee Hill and Mrs. Russie Gay. Also representing the Hill family was cousin G. Powell Hill, who was one of the directors of the A.P. Hill Monument Association. And you will hear from him a little later on with something that I found. And let's not forget another special invited guest, Mrs. George E. Pickett. She just had to be there. At one point during the ceremony, the Reverend J. William Jones addressed a crowd of 15,000 with these words: I am always happy to meet the men who wore the gray. For if there is one man on earth whom I honor and love above all other, it is the true Confederate soldier. I delight to mingle in reunions of the survivors of every army of the Confederacy as they gather from Maryland to Texas. But for me, it is always a great pleasure to mingle with the men who followed Lee and Jackson and Longstreet and Ewell and A.P. Hill and Jeb Stuart, the men who composed the Army of Northern Virginia, the noblest army of patriotic heroes that ever marched under any flag and fought for any cause in all the tide of time. Ladies and gentlemen, the keynote speaker was General James A. Walker, who gave a long and glowing speech of General Hill and came to these words of praise: gallant and noble A.P. Hill, who rose from the rank of colonel to major general in the short span of 90 days, and who filled every rank in the Army of Northern Virginia, from colonel of a regiment to lieutenant general of a corps. All this in the brief span of 15 months. The true heart of his speech came to these lines. Wherever the headquarters flag of A.P. Hill floated, whether at the head of a regiment, a brigade, a division, or a corps, in camp or on the battlefield, it floated with a grace and confidence born of skill, ability, and courage, which infused its confidence and courage into the hearts of all who followed it. And the last name on the lips of Stonewall Jackson was order A.P. Hill to prepare for action. And the last name uttered by General Robert E. Lee was, tell A.P. Hill he must come up. After 45 minutes of General Walker's speech, the time had come to unveil the General's headstone. The honor, ladies and gentlemen, was given to little Miss Virginia Meeks, who was the granddaughter of Colonel William Palmer, A.P. Hill's Chief of Staff. At 2 p.m., a bugle signaled, and with that signal, Miss Virginia Meeks, pulled the red cord, and exactly at that time, unveiled the headstone, which was sculptured in the likeness of General A.P. Hill. And the crowd of 15,000 who were present cheered continuously. And with that, there was the roar of cannon to the right, and the firing of rifles to the left, volley after volley after volley. It was a true tribute to a hero. And ladies and gentlemen, that I have the uniform on that I am wearing today is a replica that General Hill wore on that grave marker. Right here is exactly what it looks like. If you have an opportunity to see it, this is the original headstone. As you can see, the uniform I have on now is a replica of that. Someday we hope to bring it back and honor the general with the original headstone. Now I want you to listen, ladies and gentlemen. This is something I found during my research. This was written by the cousin, G. Powell Hill. And this letter was sent to the Southern Historical Society papers. Listen closely for what I have to say. Not many people know about this, but it is fitting today. The temporary burial of General Hill's body in Chesterfield County was an act of necessity and not of choice or prearrangement. As the only surviving relative who participated in the sad rites of burial of our distinguished dead, I feel it is my duty to explain why he was not buried in his native Culpeper. General Hill was killed near Petersburg, April 2nd, 1865, and the request was that I take charge of, and if possible, bury his body in Hollywood Cemetery in the city of Richmond. It was the wish of the general's wife and brothers that if the body could not be buried in Hollywood, to have it taken to Culpeper. The excitement and confusion in Richmond due to the evacuation of the city rendered it impractical for me to bury the general's remains in Hollywood, and if possible, to carry out the request of the family, namely, to take the body to Culpeper. Time was pressing us closely, and as we were expecting the federal troops to enter the city at any moment, the general's family now had serious doubts as to the practicality of attempting to convey a great distance across the country of more than 100 miles to Culpeper. We decided then to give his remains temporary burial, and that someday, some future day, remove them to his native Culpeper and place him by the side of his parents. Signed, G. Powell Hill. And that's what we are doing today, ladies and gentlemen. We are honoring the general. Ladies and gentlemen, and to the descendants of General A.P. Hill, we were all here on January 21st, 2023, and the general received his full military honors. And to the descendants, from my heart and from everybody here who is in attendance, you finally got your wish here in Culpeper. Home, family, Virginia. And to you, General Hill, you won your last battle after all. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Patrick, don't go anywhere. Patrick is always so kind every time he sees me to present me with a bust, be it the first one was Jackson, Duty Faithfully Performed, and then he mailed me one of Robert E. Lee. And so with the assistance of the vice chairman of the A.P. Hill Memorial Association, Larry Mason, I've got a little token of my appreciation for you, and it's certainly not a lot. I hope you don't have one, but I think you'll like it. Larry?
I didn't do the wrapping. Okay.
Oh.
This is a bust. It's not quite as elaborate as the one that Gary Castile has designed, the relief that you're going to see in just a few moments. But like I said, it's not the blended bronze colored like the Lee and Jackson. It's not quite as high, but it's distinctive in that it is a silver color, just as the general's grave marker in Richmond was distinctive, as it stood alone and not in the shadows of the others on Monument Avenue.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I have Lee, I have Jackson, and now I have a triple crown. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You know, when I bought that, I thought for sure he had found one somewhere, some way. I want to make a couple of acknowledgments before we get started. I've already thanked Mr. Coward for firing the first shot, and I can't say enough about this gentleman, and we've really become good friends as well over the years, starting with 2017 with the SCV lawsuit in Charlottesville, personal issues with my mother and one of my siblings starting in 2019, and then in 2020 specifically for the legal suit over General Hill's original grave marker. Not many lawyers at all would accept a case on a $2,500 retainer and a wing and a prayer that some good old redneck from Eastern Hanover could find a way to raise the money to fund that lawsuit. But by God, Colt, I've done it somehow, and we're not done yet. But Colonel S.B. Culpeper, U.S. Army retired, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and your creditors didn't come take your house because I found a way to make things work. But thank you, Colt. Yes, sir. Of course, Larry Mason is the vice chairman of the A.P. Hill Memorial Association. Keith Price, who has been invaluable, he's been my boots on the ground here in Culpeper. Keith is the secretary treasurer of the A.P. Hill Memorial Association. And of course, our token Yankee, Patrick Fousy, is a director. And so we thank you all for your service. I appreciate that. There is one gentleman in particular. You know, a lot of people tell me when I give my lectures and things of that nature, you know, without you, we wouldn't have the General's Remains here. Without you. But there's one person who could not be here today that fought tooth and nail to allow me the opportunity to do this. Fought his board of directors, fought harder against anybody than my own siblings, and assumed all of the liability in this. And that's my father, Mr. Charles Moorhead, the president and general manager of Bennett Funeral Home. And without him, none of this would have been possible, because I certainly did not have $2.5 million worth of liability insurance. I can promise you that. And so without further ado, what we're all here to see, when we initially put this program together, Patrick was going to talk about the 1892 unveiling. I was going to talk about what we're getting ready to unveil, but I wrote a pretty detailed description of the similarities and the very few differences in this grave marker we're about to unveil and the one that was unveiled in 1892. And so at this time, I would like to invite Lenny Coward, Larry Mason, and Kathy Ketterman to assist us in the unveiling of this monument.
See you later.
Commander! Load! Aye, aye, load! Load! Get your company!